I was invited to dinner with the CEO and his family, only to be told I was being replaced by his 20-year-old daughter after building the company from scratch. "Time to step aside, Granny," she said. I smiled and replied, "Completely understand." They had no idea that I didn't even want to go. The email came in at 9:47 a.m. sharp. Subject line, "Dinner with the Donnellys, Friday 7 p.m. A formal invite from HR with a little smiley face emoji, added like that made it personal. After 22 years of building CoreLogic Dynamics from a tiny tech startup in a rented warehouse to a $120 million analytics firm with global clients, I was being summoned, not to a board meeting, not to an investor call, but to dinner with the CEO and his family. My name is Mia, and I was the first person ever hired at CoreLogic. I wasn't just part of the company. I was the company. When I started, we had 3 clients and 1 printer that jammed if you looked at it wrong. I built our client systems, managed vendor contracts, handled finances until we could afford a CFO, and pitched deals that kept the lights on. The founder, Doug Donnelly, used to call me the quiet engine. He said I kept things moving when everything else threatened to fall apart. But lately, I'd felt the shift. Doug had become more distant. My updates were skimmed, rather than read. Our regular Monday meetings turned into bi-weekly calls that were sometimes rescheduled indefinitely. And then came the interns, young, loud buzzwords flying out of their mouths like confetti. I could feel the cold breeze coming before the window opened. So when I got the dinner invite, I knew. I just didn't know how cold that breeze was going to be. The restaurant was one of those swanky downtown rooftops with overpriced scallops and dramatic lighting. I wore a soft navy blouse, and the pearl earrings my daughter gave me last Mother's Day. I looked respectable, executive, the way I always had. Doug was already there, standing beside a long white linen table with his wife Patrice and their daughter Harper. She looked like she just walked off a runway. Blonde, polished, not a wrinkle in sight. In her linen pantsuit she looked like the walking embodiment of LinkedIn CEO aesthetic. "Mia," Doug beamed, arms open. "So glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it," I said, smiling as I slid into my seat across from him. My stomach coiled like rope. Dinner started off like any other executive gathering. Too much wine, too many compliments that meant too little. Harper asked about the company's early days, her tone light but condescending. "It's so funny imagining you guys working out of, like, a garage or something," she said with a little giggle. I smiled. It wasn't funny at the time. Doug cleared his throat. "Actually, Mia saved the company twice in the first 5 years. She brought in that defense contract that got us our first $1 million. Harper smirked. "Well, every company needs its building blocks. I should have walked out then, but I stayed because I wanted to see how far they'd go." Halfway through the main course, halibut over saffron rice, Doug folded his hands on the table like a man making a peace offering. "Mia, we've been doing some long-term planning," he said slowly. "You've been more than instrumental in getting CoreLogic where it is. Here it comes. But as we position the company for its next phase, we feel it's time to bring in a new generation, fresh energy, new vision." I kept my expression neutral. "Harper just finished her executive leadership program at Stanford," he added proudly, like I hadn't mentored 5 Ivy Leaguers already. "She's got some amazing ideas about modernizing the brand, moving us into blockchain, AI. "Impressive," I said calmly. "What's the transition plan?" He looked relieved. 6 weeks. She'll shadow you initially. We'll handle the formal announcement after the quarterly call. Of course, there's a generous package. We want you to feel appreciated." That's when Harper leaned forward, fork in hand, eyes glinting. "Time to step aside, Granny," she said with a little smirk. "Let us take it from here." The table went silent. Even Patricia's fork paused mid-air. I looked at her for a long moment, then I smiled. Completely understand. Because what they didn't know, what they never even thought to check, was that CoreLogic wasn't just a company I helped build. It was a company I owned. In a way they had forgotten. Doug had once given me 5% in equity when we couldn't afford a raise. I never sold it, and I'd been watching quietly ever since. They thought I'd forgotten. Doug gave me 5% of the company in 2003, 2 years after we'd started CoreLogic. We were nearly bankrupt. I had just pulled an all-nighter cleaning up a billing disaster that nearly lost us our biggest client. Doug walked into my office, red-eyed and anxious, and handed me a single-page agreement. "Mia," he'd said, "I can't pay you what you're worth right now. But if we make it through this, I want you to have a piece of it." At the time, I barely glanced at it. It felt like a thank you card more than a contract. I was exhausted, loyal, and stupidly hopeful. But years later, when we incorporated and brought in our first outside investor, I had a lawyer review everything I'd signed. That's when I found out. It wasn't symbolic. It was real equity, voting rights, ownership. I never brought it up, never boasted, never reminded Doug. I didn't need to. I was part of the fabric of the company, or so I believed. But over time, core logic changed, and so did Doug. He stopped asking for input and started chasing buzzwords. Consultants came and went, but the ones who smiled at Harper's LinkedIn profile stayed longer. Suddenly, value wasn't measured in loyalty or results. It was measured in optics, and I didn't look the part anymore. The next Monday, I walked into work like nothing had happened, smiled at reception, took my usual black coffee from the machine that still hissed like a steam train, logged into my email. My access was untouched. For now, no official announcements, just silence. Luis, our data engineer, stopped by my office with that cautious look he gets when something's off. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just a little dinner with the Donnellys." He winced. I heard words starting to get around. "People are confused." I met his eyes. Let them wonder. I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. Instead, I called up the shareholder portal and logged in. My 5% was still there, untouched. And with the new investors bringing fresh capital, that sliver of ownership had grown into something substantial. I downloaded everything: stock agreements, board voting history, executive pay packages. Then I requested a meeting with Doug's executive assistant. "I'd like 30 minutes with Doug. Private." She blinked, surprised, but nodded. "I'll see what I can do." When I stepped into Doug's office on Wednesday, he looked up with a wary smile. "Mia," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "How are things?" "Curious," I said, sitting down. "You didn't mention the equity I still hold." His smile froze just slightly. "I assumed you'd cashed out by now." I didn't. I placed the printed shareholder agreement on his desk. "And unless I miss something, I still have voting rights." Doug folded his hands. "Mia, this doesn't need to get complicated. We're offering you a generous exit." "I'm not leaving yet," I said calmly. "I'll support the transition. I'll do it with grace. But if Harper plans to restructure the company, if she intends to bring in her own team or sell off assets, I want my say." He frowned. "You're holding on to something out of sentimentality." "No," I said. "I'm holding on to what I built." I left before he could respond. Let him stew in it. That evening, I pulled out a dusty file cabinet in my home office. Inside was everything from the early days: sketches of the original architecture, notes from client pitches, the very first UI mock UPS drawn on paper napkins. And then I found something I hadn't seen in years: an NDA signed by Doug in 02/2005, acknowledging that several proprietary tools I'd built for the company had originated from my previous consulting work, the kind of detail most people forget about, but I don't forget. The next day I met with Melissa, an old friend and now a top-tier IP attorney. We had coffee at a quiet bistro 2 blocks from CoreLogic HQ. I laid it all out. "Can I protect this?" I asked. She smiled as she flipped through the pages. "Mia, you own this, at least part of it. And with your equity, you've got leverage they didn't expect." I exhaled, the weight of 2 decades sitting heavy in my chest. "They think I'm a stepping stone. Then let's show them," she said, "that stones can crack foundations." By the end of the week, the whispers had started. Why is Mia still here? Why is she so calm? Why hasn't Harper taken over yet? I smiled as I passed them in the hall. They'd invited me to dinner to write my ending, but they didn't realize I was writing the next chapter. By Monday, Harper had moved into my office. Not officially, of course, but she was hovering, showing up early, walking in with coffee and a forced smile like we were best friends. Her tone was sugar-coated. Her questions loaded. She asked about vendor relationships and back-end systems, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't here to learn. She was here to replace. "Do you always approve budget requests manually?" she asked, flipping through a report she barely understood. "Always," I replied. "It catches errors. Automation doesn't. But if we use predictive tools are only as good as the data behind them. We still have legacy clients using decade-old systems, garbage in, garbage out." She blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the concept, then smiled again. "You're a bit old school." There it was. I just smiled back. Old school kept this company from collapsing during 3 separate downturns, but feel free to learn the hard way. She didn't like that. By Wednesday, she had organized her first strategy meeting without me, sent invites to the leadership team, excluding only one name, mine. Louise forwarded me the invite anyway. Thought you'd want to see this. The subject line? Vision 2.0. CoreLogic's future begins now. Cute. I clicked open the agenda and immediately saw what she was up to. New branding initiative, hiring freeze in operations, potential outsourcing of back-end services. I laughed out loud. Outsourcing back-end? Half our client value was back-end support. Clients didn't come to us for shiny dashboards. They came because we knew how to keep their systems running when everyone else bailed. She didn't know the company. She knew of the company. The version her father talked about over Sunday brunch. That same afternoon, Doug dropped by my desk, something he hadn't done in years. Mia, he said, putting on that politician voice. I want to make sure the transition is smooth. Harper's getting a lot of visibility already. Visibility isn't knowledge, I said flatly. He paused. You've always been the soul of this place. You invited me to dinner to get the soul out of it. Doug flinched just slightly. That's not what this is. Then what is it, Doug? Because I built the systems. I kept the investors calm. I held your company together while you were taking sabbaticals in Napa. Silence. I know about the Series C dilution, I added. You're prepping the company for acquisition. His eyes widened. How I've been here long enough to know how the winds change. He didn't deny it, just looked at the floor. We had to make hard choices. The board wanted a fresh face, a new story, a story you thought didn't include me. He hesitated. We're offering you a package. I'm not interested in your package, I said. I'm interested in what I'm owed. I walked away before he could respond. Back in my office, I emailed Melissa. I wanted the provisional patents filed by the end of the week. Not just the old architecture, but the improvements I developed over the years. I wasn't sabotaging the company, but I was drawing a line. Anything that bore my fingerprints was going to be legally protected. Thursday morning, I found Harper at the whiteboard mapping out her new client retention model. It was lifted almost word for word from a strategy document I'd written 6 years ago. She must have dug through the archives. When she saw me watching, she smiled. I'm just modernizing, she said. Your work was a great foundation. No problem, I said, stepping closer. Just make sure you cite your sources. Plagiarism doesn't look great on quarterly reports. Her smile flickered. By Friday, the IT team was whispering. Vanessa, my operations lead, cornered me in the break room. They're nervous, she said quietly. Harper's pushing changes that don't make sense, and Doug's not saying a word. Because he's not in charge anymore, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. Vanessa looked at me. What are you doing, Mia? Setting the table, I replied. For what? For the storm, I said. But it's okay. I planned to smile through it. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of red wine and my laptop open. The emails were already drafted. One to the remaining 3 board members, reminding them of my equity, and the original shareholder clause that required unanimous consent for structural overhauls. One to Technova Systems, a company we'd nearly acquired last year, now growing fast. I was on good terms with their CEO. I wanted a meeting. And one last email to myself. Subject line, leverage. I was storing everything, just in case. I didn't want war. I wanted recognition. But if they kept pushing me, they'd find out just how old school I could be. The official announcement came on a Tuesday morning. All staff meeting, mandatory attendance. Harper at the front of the auditorium with a wireless mic, pacing like a TED speaker, while a slideshow played behind her filled with stock photos and vague slogans, vision, velocity, victory. Doug introduced her with a warm smile, calling her a breath of fresh air. Harper beamed and thanked him like she just won a beauty pageant. Then she turned to the staff and said it. It's time for a new chapter, she began. A younger, leaner, and more innovative CoreLogic. And there it was, not even subtle. I sat in the second row, arms folded, watching the faces around me. Most people tried to hide their discomfort. Vanessa looked stunned. Luis wouldn't even meet my eyes. Then Harper gestured toward the projector, and a slide came up with the words, Organizational Streamlining Plan, Phase 1. That's when my jaw tightened, because that slide detailed a restructuring plan. Cuts to back-end operations. Outsourced IT functions, merging departments, and worst of all, legacy management transition, meaning me. They didn't even say my name. After the meeting, Harper approached me in the hallway, alone, confident. I hope you'll be graceful about this, she said, voice low. It's what people expect of veterans. I tilted my head. You mean women who've outlived 3 CEOs and built the systems keeping this place standing? She didn't answer. Just smiled like I was being difficult. That afternoon, HR sent an official separation package, a check with a lot of zeros, an NDA, and a clause that stated I was to assist in a full knowledge transfer, and that's when they pushed too far. I walked into Doug's office, package in hand. He was already bracing for it. Mia, he started. You let your daughter stand up there and pretend this was her idea, I said. You let her call me obsolete in front of everyone, and now you want me to hand over my work like a loyal old dog? It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I said. And let me be clear, I'm not signing anything. Not today. Not ever. He exhaled. Then you're forcing us to terminate. You're forgetting something, I said, reaching into my bag. I still have my shareholder seat. You try to force me out without board approval, you'll be in breach of the original agreement. Doug went pale. You think Harper's ideas are shiny and new, but they're dangerous. Cutting the back end will cripple your infrastructure. And that predictive automation model she keeps talking about, it doesn't even comply with our client contracts. You know that. He leaned back, silent. I'm not trying to sink the ship, I added, but I won't let you sink me with it. That night, I met Vanessa and Luis at a quiet diner across town. I slid them both manila envelopes. What is this? Vanessa asked. Proof, I said, that what we built isn't just lines of code. It's intellectual property, documented, time-stamped, traceable. You're going to sue them? Luis asked. Not unless they make me, I said. But I want you both to be protected. Harper's already planning a second round of cuts. Vanessa nodded slowly. She's got the PR team working on the press release. They're cleaning house before the acquisition, I said. CoreLogic is being packaged, streamlined, turned into a shiny object. Luis looked up. Are you going to stop it? No, I said. I'm going to shape it. Over the next 3 days I worked like a ghost. Quiet, unassuming, but precise. I met with Melissa again, filed a cease and desist letter regarding the reuse of proprietary modules in Harper's new systems. I sent a letter to the board, formal notice that I intended to vote against the restructuring unless a neutral third-party audit was completed, and I met with the CEO of Teknova over lunch just to chat. But when I mentioned CoreLogic's shifting leadership, his eyebrows rose. They're positioning for a sale, I said. He nodded slowly. That would explain the talent reaching out to us. I smiled. If you're interested, I can tell you which systems you'd want to protect, and who actually understands them. By Friday, the pressure had reached Harper. Her voice had a new edge to it in meetings. Her smiles were tighter. The confidence was cracking because the people she thought she could lead were starting to look back at me. And all I did was smile because the storm she tried to unleash had already built the levees. By Monday, 3 of Harper's flashy new initiatives had failed. The vendor migration she promised would cut costs, delayed due to integration issues, also known as Luis quietly pulling the plug on a compatibility patch he'd personally written 2 years ago. The rebranding proposal, on hold after the legal team flagged it for infringing on a smaller tech firm's trademark, a firm I knew personally. I might have tipped them off. And the new predictive analytics model, it crashed the second it was tested on live client data. Garbage in, garbage out, just like I'd warned. But Harper didn't stop. She doubled down. She called a meeting that afternoon, mandatory for all department heads. Her voice was clipped, fake smiling through her frustration. We are going through growing pains, she said. But I want to assure you, we are on the right path. Disruption is never comfortable. From the corner of the room, I raised an eyebrow. Disruption works when there's a parachute. You've cut every safety net this company had. She smiled tightly. Thank you for your feedback, Mia. Doug sat in silence. He wasn't even trying to hide anymore. Just a figurehead slumped in a chair, letting his daughter steer the ship toward an iceberg. After the meeting, Vanessa caught up with me. 3 of our longtime clients called today, she said, voice low. They're nervous. One's threatening to walk if their service quality drops again. I nodded. Let me guess. Harper hasn't returned their emails. She thinks they'll wait. They won't. I went home that night, opened my laptop, and wrote a 2-line email to Daniel Rayner. Subject, follow-up from our lunch. If your board is serious, now is the time to move. Daniel Rayner was the CEO of Teknova, and his board had been circling CoreLogic for months, waiting for the perfect moment to make a move. I wasn't going to sabotage anything, but I was going to hand them a mirror. Let them see what was happening behind the curtain. The next morning I found Harper in my old office, feet up on the desk, tossing a stress ball between her hands. She didn't even look up when I knocked. "Can I help you?" she asked like I was the intern. "I need a few minutes," she sighed. "Make it quick." I stepped inside, calm as ever. "You're losing the company." That got her attention. "I know you think people will follow you because you talk about innovation and branding, but this place wasn't built on slogans. It was built on trust, relationships, systems that actually work." She stood up, eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm giving you a chance." "To what?" "To stop pretending you know what you're doing." She scoffed. "My father is being pushed to the sidelines by his own board," I said. "You're a figurehead, just like he is now." She stared at me, the bravado cracking just a little. "You want to lead?" I added. "Fine, lead. But don't burn the foundation down just to prove you can light a match." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. Later that day, Doug requested a private meeting. No assistants, no Harper. He looked tired, really tired. "Mia," he said, sitting down across from me. "What do you want?" I took a breath. "I want recognition, not a payout, not a title. Recognition." He rubbed his face. "The board is spooked. They've seen the instability. They know your name is still tied to every critical system." "They should be spooked," I said. "They handed a multi-million-dollar operation to someone who thinks legacy experience is a liability." "And Technova?" he asked quietly. I just smiled. "I had lunch with Daniel. The offer's real. But I haven't decided yet." Doug looked at me, really looked at me. "For the first time in months. You could walk away from all of this." "I could," I said. "But I won't because what I built matters. And if they want to keep using it, they're going to do it on my terms." That evening I got a text from Vanessa. "Client X just sent an official letter of concern to the board. Things are shifting." I replied with 2 words. "Hold steady." Harper had the microphone, but I had the stage. And in just a few more moves, I'd be the one rewriting the script. The boardroom was full, not just physically, but viscerally. The kind of full where tension hangs in the air like static, and everyone pretends they're calm when they can barely breathe. It was Thursday, emergency session. The board had called it. The CEO, the interim leadership team, department heads, and me. Doug sat at the end of the table looking 10 years older than he had 2 weeks ago. Harper sat beside him, flipping nervously through a leather notebook she hadn't written a single useful word in. And across from me, the man I'd spoken with over lunch just days ago, Daniel Rayner, CEO of Technova, now wearing the polite, detached expression of someone evaluating a company's organs before deciding whether to transplant or walk away. "Before we begin," said Celeste, the board chairwoman, "we need to address the elephant in the room." She nodded toward me. "Mia has brought to our attention several items, contractual, technical, and operational, that were not disclosed during our internal assessments of CoreLogic's transition phase." A few heads turned. Doug's face was stone. Harper glanced at me like she finally understood she'd stepped into something much bigger than her. Celeste continued. "As per our original shareholder agreement, any attempt to restructure the executive function requires unanimous board approval if it affects stakeholders with more than a 3% share." She turned toward me. "Mia, would you like to speak?" I stood, not rushed, not emotional, just grounded. "I'm not here to cause chaos," I began. "I've never wanted that. I'm here because for over 2 decades I gave everything I had to this company. And somewhere along the way, people started treating that as a weakness, as expendable." Harper's jaw clenched. I didn't look at her. "I don't want a crown. I don't need a title. But I do want my work respected. I want my contributions acknowledged. And I want whoever leads this company to understand that innovation means nothing without a foundation to stand on." There was silence. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "We've been watching this closely," he said, gesturing around the room. "And we've seen the fallout. 3 major clients have voiced concern. 2 have paused contract renewals. And based on internal reports, the systems that make CoreLogic valuable are not as autonomous as previously claimed." His gaze shifted toward Harper. She froze. He looked back at the board. "Our offer still stands, but it's contingent on leadership stability. And frankly, we won't proceed if the current transition plan remains in place." Translation: Harper had to go. Doug opened his mouth, but Celeste held up a hand. Let's take a 10-minute recess. People rose, whispering among themselves as they filtered into the hallway. I stayed seated. So did Harper. She looked at me. Really looked at me. I didn't mean to destroy anything, she said, her voice small now. I met her eyes. You wanted to prove yourself. I get it. But you came in swinging without ever asking what we were swinging at. You treated people like obstacles, and you treated me like a footnote. She swallowed. What happens now? I leaned in slightly. That's not up to me anymore. That's the board's call. 10 minutes later, we returned. Celeste stood and delivered the verdict like a calm judge. Effective immediately, Harper Donnelly is relieved of all transition leadership duties. Doug will remain in an advisory role through the acquisition period. Mia Carter, she turned to me, will lead a transitional advisory team reporting directly to the board and our prospective partners at Technova. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Later that week I signed my consulting contract. 3 times my old salary, full autonomy, and authority over systems integration during the acquisition. Harper left quietly. No goodbye email. No farewell party. Doug shook my hand one last time in the lobby. I'm sorry, he said softly. I know, I replied. 2 months later, CoreLogic officially became part of Technova. Most of the staff stayed. I handpicked a new leadership team. Vanessa became director of operations. Louise took over engineering. Half the company now reported to people I'd personally trained, and I didn't move back into my old office. I worked from a small home setup overlooking the lake. Twice a week, I walked barefoot on the deck with my coffee, watching the sunrise while client dashboards loaded smoothly in the background. Systems I designed, still humming quietly beneath the surface. One evening I got an email from Celeste. Subject: Legacy, Mia. What you did, the way you handled it. We've never seen anything like it. You didn't just protect your legacy. You reminded everyone what real leadership looks like. I sat there a long time staring at the screen. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about power. It was about value, knowing it, owning it, and refusing to let anyone take it from you.
Let my brother live in my apartment for free, but he rented it out as a romantic getaway for daily rentals, and earned $15,000. You're already rich. I needed the money, he said, so I called my lawyer, but then this happened. My name is Dana, 34, living in Seattle now but originally from Portland. I work as a marketing manager for a tech company, which is why I had to relocate a couple years ago. My life was pretty normal until that phone call from my mom 6 months ago. Dana, honey, I need to ask you a huge favor, Mom said, her voice shaky. What's wrong? I immediately tensed up. It's your brother. Ethan lost his job, and they're struggling financially. With little Charlie and Jessica not working, they need some place to stay until they get back on their feet. I sighed. Ethan was always the problem child growing up. For years younger than me, he had a knack for finding the easy way out of everything. We weren't super close, but he was my brother. Mom, I don't even live in Portland anymore. What am I supposed to do? The apartment you bought with Grandma's inheritance money is just sitting there empty. They could stay there temporarily, just for 6 months until Ethan finds work. I rubbed my temples. That apartment was supposed to be my financial lifeline. After Grandma died, we split the sale of her house. I used my half to buy that apartment, while Ethan, I never really knew what happened to his money. It vanished within months. Mom, I was planning to rent it out. I already have a realtor looking for tenants. I need that rental income to help with my mortgage here. Please, Dana? Her voice cracked. Just 6 months, he promised. I pictured Ethan, Jessica, and their 3-year-old son Charlie with nowhere to go. Jessica had always seemed responsible at least. She would keep the place clean. Let me think about it. They need to move in next week, honey. They can't afford another month at their place. Of course it was urgent. It always was with Ethan. That night I called my realtor, Mark, who'd been a friend since college. Hey, I need to put the rental plans on hold. Family emergency. Seriously, I've got 3 potential tenants lined up to view it this weekend. I know, I'm sorry, my brother needs a place to stay 6 months supposedly. That'll cost you, Dana. You're paying what, $2,100 on your Seattle mortgage? Yes, and that's why I needed the rental income. Well, family first, I guess, Mark said, though I could hear the doubt in his voice. The next morning I called my mom back. Fine, Ethan can stay there, 6 months max. I'll mail the keys today. Oh, sweetheart, thank you, you're saving them. Ethan promised he'll be the perfect tenant. I hung up feeling like I'd just been steamrolled, but that's how it always was with family, especially mine. Dad was probably lurking in the background during that call, letting Mom do the emotional heavy lifting. 2 months flew by. I was swamped with work and barely thought about the apartment situation, until I had to fly back to Portland for a conference. I called Ethan the night before arriving. "Hey, I'm in town tomorrow, thought I'd stop by and see the place, catch up with you guys." There was a pause. "Actually, tomorrow's not great. Charlie's got a thing at daycare, and the place is a mess. Why don't we meet at Mom and Dad's? We'll come over for dinner." Oh, something in his voice sounded off. "Sure, that works. Great, see you there." After hanging up, I felt uneasy. Was it weird he didn't want me to see my own apartment? Maybe not. They probably were embarrassed about their situation. Still, I'd wanted to check on the place, make sure everything was okay. The next evening at my parents' house, Ethan arrived with Jessica and Charlie. Charlie had grown so much since I'd last seen him, racing around the living room while the adults talked. "How's the apartment working out?" I asked, watching Jessica's face for any signs of trouble. "It's perfect," Ethan said quickly. "We really appreciate it, sis." "It's very comfortable," Jessica added, "and the location is great for Charlie's daycare." Then, out of nowhere, Ethan cleared his throat. "Listen, Dana, I hate to ask this, but I found this great retraining program. It would guarantee me a job in web development, but it costs $5,000. My jaw nearly dropped. $5,000? I'll pay you back in a couple months when I start working, I promise. It's an investment in our future." Mom and Dad exchanged glances, and I knew they were in on it. This wasn't a spontaneous request. "Ethan, that's a lot of money." "I know, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. This is my chance to turn things around." I looked at little Charlie playing on the floor. I thought about my savings account, which was healthy but not unlimited. "Fine," I finally said. "I'll transfer it tomorrow." "You're the best, sis," Ethan grinned, giving me a big hug that felt a little too enthusiastic. I didn't visit the apartment that trip. Something told me to just let it be. I trusted Jessica to keep things in order, and if Ethan was really going to get training and a job, then things would work out. 6 months would fly by, and I'd have my apartment back to rent out properly. Another 4 months passed in a blur of deadlines and meetings. Seattle kept me busy enough to almost forget about my Portland apartment situation. Almost. I had just finished a presentation when my phone buzzed. It was Mark, my realtor friend. "Hey Dana, quick question. Did you decide to rent out your apartment yourself?" I froze. "What? No, Ethan's still living there." "That's weird because I just saw a listing for it online. Same address, same photos I took last year. I'll send you the link. Call me back after you look." The text came through seconds later. With shaking hands, I clicked the link and felt my blood pressure spike. There was my apartment, my furniture, my carefully chosen decor, advertised as a romantic getaway for daily rentals. Cozy love nest in a quiet, peaceful area, with beautiful park views. Comfortable king-sized bed, perfect for couples seeking privacy and romance. The contact person? Ethan Mitchell. His phone number was right there. I nearly threw up at my desk. My beautiful apartment was being used as some kind of hourly hotel. How many strangers had been in my bed? Using my things? My mind raced with horrifying images. I quickly took screenshots of everything and called Mark back. "Did you see it?" he asked. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice shaking. "He's renting out my apartment to couples 4-4. God, I can't even say it." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to Portland tomorrow." I hung up and marched straight to my boss's office to ask for 2 days off. That night, I booked the earliest flight to Portland and packed a small bag. I could barely sleep, imagining all kinds of people in my apartment, touching my things, sleeping in my bed. By the time I landed in Portland the next day, my shock had hardened into pure rage. I took a taxi straight to my apartment building. I still had my own key, but I knocked instead. No answer. I knocked harder. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door opened. A man wearing nothing but boxers stood there, a woman in a bathrobe peeking from behind him. "Can I help you?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "Yes, actually, this is my apartment," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. They exchanged nervous glances. "We rented it for the day," the man said, "from a woman named Jessica. May I see the agreement?" He reluctantly grabbed his phone and showed me a rental agreement with Jessica's signature at the bottom. "Thank you. I'm so sorry, but you've been scammed. I own this apartment, and Jessica is my sister-in-law who has no right to rent it out." The couple's faces fell. "Are you serious? We paid $150 for the day. I wish I wasn't serious. You should probably get dressed and leave. I need to deal with this situation." After they hurriedly packed up and left, I stood in my apartment, stunned. Everything looked different. My bedspread was new, cheaper. Several decorative pieces were missing. The place smelled like a mixture of cheap air freshener and strangers. I called Ethan immediately. "Hey sis," he answered casually. "I thought you were in Seattle." "I'm in Portland. I need to pick up some important documents and my photo album from my apartment." I'll stop by later today. There was a pause. Oh, don't worry about it. I can find those things and bring them to Mom and Dad's. That's so thoughtful, I said, forcing sweetness into my voice. It was the perfect trap. Those documents and photo album didn't exist. I had deliberately made them up to see how he'd react. Perfect, I continued. I'll see you at Mom and Dad's later. I hung up and waited. If I knew my brother, he'd be panicking right now, rushing to my apartment to clean up evidence of his side business before I arrived. So I went to my car, parked it where I could see the entrance to my building, and waited. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, Ethan's blue Honda pulled up. He dashed inside looking frantic. I gave him an hour, plenty of time to search for non-existent documents and probably try to hide evidence of his rental scheme. When he finally emerged, his face was pale and he was frantically making phone calls. I stepped out of my car and walked toward him. Looking for something, Ethan? He jumped like he'd seen a ghost. Dana, what the? Surprise, there are no documents, Ethan. But I did find something interesting, your little side business. His face went from shock to desperate pleading in seconds. I can explain. Explain what? How you've been renting my apartment to couples for romantic hookups. Using my bed, my things? You don't understand, I needed the money. You have it easy, good job, no kids. You have no idea what it's like for us. Jessica hasn't found work. Charlie's daycare costs a fortune. You lied to me, to Mom, to everyone. Give me my keys now. I can't right now. I have bookings for the next few days. People have paid deposits. I laughed in disbelief. You think I care about your illegal bookings? Keys now or I go to the police? You wouldn't. Try me. He stepped back. Let me talk to the people who'd booked first. I'll bring the keys to Mom and Dad's tonight. I'm not staying with them. I'm at the Courtyard Marriott downtown, room 312. Bring them there by 8 p.m., or I'm calling the cops first thing tomorrow. I turned and walked away, my whole body shaking. Part of me knew my parents would side with Ethan, they always did, so I deliberately checked into a hotel rather than staying with them. I needed neutral ground for what was coming next. I barely made it back to my hotel room when my phone exploded with notifications. Mom, Dad, and 3 missed calls from Ethan. I took a deep breath before listening to the first voicemail. Dana, it's Mom. What do you think you're doing? Ethan just called us in tears. You're threatening your own brother with the police? Have you lost your mind? Delete. The second one wasn't any better. Your father and I are extremely disappointed in you. Family doesn't do this to family. Call me back immediately. I tossed my phone on the bed and stared at the ceiling. This was exactly why I'd checked into a hotel instead of staying with my parents. In their eyes, Ethan could do no wrong, and I was the villain for holding him accountable. My phone rang again. Ethan, I answered this time. You can't do this to me, he said immediately, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. If you go to the police, I could lose my job. My reputation would be ruined. You should have thought about that before turning my apartment into a pay-by-the-hour motel, I replied coldly. It wasn't like that. It was just a way to make some extra cash. With my property, without my permission. Do you have any idea how violated I feel? How many strangers have been in my bed, Ethan? I always change the sheets. Oh my God, stop talking. I felt nauseous again. I want my keys in the next 48 hours, or I'm going to the police. And before you call Mom and Dad again, just know that nothing they say will change my mind. I hung up and immediately called Alan, my lawyer in Seattle. I need advice, I told him, explaining the whole situation. You've got a solid case for fraud, Alan said. He misrepresented himself as having authority to rent your property and profited from it. Plus, he's likely not reporting this income to the IRS. What should I do? Document everything. Those screenshots you took are good. The testimony from the couple who rented it would help too. You could file a police report and report him to the tax authorities. I just threatened him with that. Sometimes the threat is enough. Send him a formal cease and desist letter. I'll email you a template tonight. Include that you have evidence and are prepared to pursue both criminal and civil charges. After getting off the phone with Alan, I ordered room service and tried to calm down. But every time I closed my eyes, I pictured strangers in my apartment, in my bed. I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Around 9:30 p.m., someone knocked on my hotel room door. I checked the peephole, Ethan. When I opened the door, he thrust my keys into my hand and turned to leave without a word. Ethan, wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. We need to talk about the damage to my apartment. What damage? Now he faced me, eyes narrowed. Several things are broken or missing, and it needs a deep cleaning. At minimum. That's not my problem. Actually it is. You took my apartment under false pretenses and used it for profit. I'm well within my rights to sue you for damages. You've got your keys back. What more do you want from me? I'm going to have an appraiser look at the apartment tomorrow. If you want to avoid legal action, you'll pay for all repairs plus compensation for what you've done. Ethan laughed bitterly. You really are a cold bastard, aren't you? Mom was right. I felt like he'd slapped me. Excuse me? I'm the one who was lied to and taken advantage of. I'm the one whose personal space was violated, and I'm the cold one? You've always had everything so easy. Perfect Dana with her perfect job and perfect life. That perfect life came from hard work, not from scamming family members. You know what? I'm done talking. Expect an email from my lawyer tomorrow. I shut the door in his face, my hands shaking with anger. The next morning I went straight to my apartment. In the harsh daylight the damage was even more apparent. Stains on the carpet, a crack in my bathroom vanity. My designer couch had a mysterious tear. The place smelled like a mixture of cheap cologne and cleaning products. I called a professional appraiser who came that afternoon. His estimate, $10,000 for repairs and replacements to return the apartment to its previous condition. He gave me a detailed written report, which I immediately scanned and emailed to Alan. That evening, Alan sent me a formal demand letter addressed to Ethan. It outlined the damages, $10,000, demanded an additional $10,000 for emotional distress, and gave him 1 week to respond before we would pursue legal action. It also mentioned potential reports to the IRS regarding his unreported rental income. I forwarded the email to Ethan with a simple message, I'm not bluffing. Within minutes my phone rang. It was Mom again. What is wrong with you? She screamed. A lawyer, $20,000? Are you trying to destroy your brother's life? Mom, do you even know what he did? He wasn't living in my apartment. He was renting my apartment to couples for intimate encounters, daily for profit. He explained that to us. He needed the money, so do I. That's why I was going to rent it out legitimately. Instead, he lied to all of us and used my property without permission. That's illegal, Mom. He's your brother. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to return something. This was calculated deception that went on for months. Mom's voice softened slightly. Dana, please. This would ruin him. You have a good job. You don't need this money. This isn't about money, it's about respect and consequences. He needs to learn he can't just take what he wants and lie to get it. We raised you better than this, she said, her voice cold again. Your father and I are very disappointed in you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat on my damaged couch and cried for the first time since this whole mess began. Not because I felt guilty, but because my own parents couldn't see how deeply I'd been hurt by Ethan's betrayal. The next day, I returned to Seattle, leaving the apartment locked and empty. I'd arranged for a cleaning service to come the following week. I threw myself back into work, trying not to think about the family drama I'd left behind in Portland. 6 days after I sent the demand letter, $20,000 appeared in my bank account. The transfer was from Ethan, with no message attached. 2 days later, another $5,000 showed up, the money I'd loaned him for his retraining courses. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. How had we become so broken as a family? I hadn't spoken to my parents in over a week, the longest we'd ever gone without communication. And Ethan? I couldn't even think about him without feeling a mixture of anger and betrayal. What hurt most was realizing that none of them, not Ethan, not my parents, seemed to understand how violated I felt. To them, I was just being difficult and unforgiving. But they hadn't seen strangers in their bed, using their personal space for who knows what. With the money from Ethan in my account, I took 2 weeks of unpaid leave from work and returned to Portland. The apartment needed serious attention, and I wanted to oversee the repairs myself. I hired contractors, replaced the damaged furniture, and supervised a deep cleaning that took 3 full days. The whole time I kept thinking about how things had spiraled so out of control. I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost 3 weeks now. They hadn't called, and I hadn't called them. The silence was deafening. As for Ethan, I had no idea what was happening with him, and honestly, I didn't care. The betrayal was still too fresh. When the renovations were complete, I called Mark. The apartment's ready. I need good tenants this time. A stable couple with steady jobs will sign a long-term lease. Got it, Mark said. I actually have a nice couple in mind, both teachers. Been married 5 years, no kids yet, excellent credit, want to meet them? A week later, I signed a 2-year lease with Thomas and Ella Chen. They seemed lovely, exactly the kind of responsible tenants I'd wanted from the beginning. I gave them my contact information and flew back to Seattle, feeling like a chapter had closed. Work consumed me for the next month. My boss had been understanding about my absence, but I had a lot of catching up to do. I threw myself into projects, staying late and working weekends, anything to avoid thinking about my family situation. Then, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen for several rings, debating whether to answer. Finally I picked up. Hello? Dana. Mom's voice sounded tired. How are you? I'm fine. Working a lot. An awkward silence stretched between us, then Mom sighed. There's something you should know. Ethan confessed to us last week that he and Jessica bought their own apartment 6 months ago with a mortgage. He never lost his job. There were no financial problems. I sat down, stunned. What? He made it all up. The scheme to use your apartment was just a way to pay off their mortgage faster. He's been renting it out since the very beginning. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. So where were they living when they supposedly needed my apartment? In their own place? They bought it right before he asked to stay in yours. I laughed bitterly. Wow. Just, wow. And you believed him all this time? We didn't know, Dana. He lied to us too. Her voice cracked. Your father and I had a huge fight with him. We told him he needs to pay back every penny he made from renting your apartment, or we're cutting him off completely. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt vindicated that my parents finally saw Ethan for what he was. Another part felt deeply sad that it had come to this. I'm sorry we didn't believe you, Mom continued. We should have listened. Yes, you should have, I said, not ready to let her off the hook completely. Will you come visit soon? Your father misses you. Maybe. I need some time. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment, thinking about everything that had happened. The whole situation felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie rather than my actual life. 3 months passed. I'd started talking to my parents again, though things were still strained. We kept our conversations light, avoiding any mention of Ethan. I visited them twice, carefully timing my trips to ensure Ethan wouldn't be there. Then one day, I checked my account and found 3 deposits of $5,000 each from Ethan. No message, no explanation, just the money. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. This was presumably the rental income he'd made from my apartment, money he'd gained through deception and betrayal. I didn't want it. It felt tainted. After thinking about it for a few days, I transferred the entire $15,000 to the Children's Hospital Foundation. If there was any way to cleanse that money, giving it to help sick children seemed like the best option. I emailed my parents to let them know what I'd done with the money. Dad called me that evening. That was a good thing you did with the money, he said. Your mother and I are proud of you. Thanks, Dad. He cleared his throat. Ethan asks about you sometimes. Wants to know how you're doing. I'm not ready to talk to him. I understand. He knows he messed up badly. He doesn't even come around when he knows you'll be here. Too ashamed, I think. Good, he should be. Last month, I visited Portland again for my parents' anniversary. The dinner was nice, just the 3 of us. As I was helping Mom with the dishes afterward, she casually mentioned that Ethan and Jessica were expecting another baby. That's nice, I said, focusing on drying a plate. He's changed, Dana. This whole experience, it forced him to grow up. I nodded but said nothing. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? She asked. I put down the dish towel and looked at her. Maybe someday, but not yet. The apartment in Portland is doing well with Thomas and Ella. They pay their rent on time, and Mark checks him periodically to make sure everything's in order. My mortgage payments in Seattle are no longer a source of stress. Life has settled into a new normal. I talk to my parents weekly now, and they've stopped pushing me about reconciling with Ethan. They understand, or at least they're trying to. Sometimes I wonder what I'd say to Ethan if I saw him again. Would I yell, cry, listen to his explanation? I still don't know. But I do know that trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. Maybe someday we'll find our way back to being brother and sister again. Maybe time will soften the edges of this betrayal. For now though, I'm focusing on my own life, my career, my friends, the family relationships I can salvage. If there's one thing this whole ordeal taught me, it's that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people you love most, but they're also the most necessary.